weird wiggly worm.
Is it dead?
No, it's very definitely alive.
What, like
And look, there's another centipede.
It's a centipede.
We found centipedes yesterday in the garden, didn't we?
We're in Foxhanger Wood. We're just outside Godalming, south of the Hog's Back, on the beginning of the Surrey Weald.
The name Foxhanger derives from the Old English hangra, a wooded slope too steep for cultivation. This hanger stretches from the A3 to Farncombe, more than 75 acres of varied woodland habitats.
The wood is about 10 acres. There's the escarpment, which is partly planted with larch and partly ancient woodland. And then the level bit at the top, which is about 5 acres, is ancient coppiced chestnut. There is a small patch of hazel, which is occasionally coppiced. And then there's a small area of wild wood, which is reputedly an old Gertrude Jekyll wild garden.
The Bliss family moved to Foxhanger in 1950. The house had been extended from an earlier cottage in 1911 when Jekyll, who lived locally at Munstead Wood, was at her height. It was sold as having a Jekyll garden, and the layout was indeed typical, but the woodland section had already reverted to nature.
In the 1950s, my father got a grant to plant larch for pit props, because larch was a very good wood to use for pit props because it makes a noise before it breaks, so it gave the miners some warning. Of course, now they don't use larch anymore and it's of no value whatsoever.
It would be difficult to try and turn that into a commercial crop. That said, as it gradually senesces over a period of time, it turns into some very valuable deadwood habitat. A bit of diversity is good. Equally, a non-intervention area is very good, and the badger set underneath will probably agree with that.
There's badger, deer, fox, rabbits obviously, mice, snakes, birds, a variety of fungi and lichens and a lot of different wildflowers.
As soon as you clear the trees out of the way, the spring flowers. Now they get maximum light and they really show themselves to best effect.
Many British woods have been invaded by Spanish bluebells that have escaped from gardens. These are the native English species, and the family aimed to keep it that way.
When my father died, we decided to keep the wood because it's part of our DNA. My brother, sister and I all live a significant distance from the wood, but we have a very good coppicer who comes and works a section a year.
The lovely thing about Foxhanger is you've got more or less a full spectrum of the coppice cycle. So you've got almost 16 compartments, one compartment every year, and so we've got everything from, as I look to my right, the next winter's cut to the section that we've just done this winter, to the section that was last cut 5 years ago, and the regrowth on that is now about 15 feet high.
Traditionally, these trees were used for chestnut paling and walking sticks. They were cut on a 3-year cycle for 9 years and then allowed to grow for a further 9. Today the wood is again self-sustaining, with timber products more than covering the management regime.
The bulk of it is for fencing materials, and you can split that out and point it and turn it into fencing stakes. You can have straining posts to go on the end of your agricultural fencing, post and rail fencing, ranch kind of style. I build continuous woven fences. The chestnuts go in as the upright, and usually use hazel to weave in and out. And you can put in a line of these stakes about 18 inches apart, and then just weave in and out, and you give yourself an instant screen, but also something you can grow lots of things up. The bits that aren't quite so straight, we can also put those to use, either making firewood or charcoal.
The charcoal works are in nearby Bramley, where Foxhanger timbers were used for this building. But there's more to running a family coppice than balancing the books.
Most of the houses on the road that backs onto the wood have gates onto the wood, which we have regularly put notices on them to remind them that this does not give them a right of access. And on the other sides there are public bridleways. There is also a permissive pass that goes through the middle of the wood, which we have to re-register every 10 or 20 years with a solicitor and the council to make sure it stays as a permissive private path rather than becomes a public footpath. We are quite happy for people to walk their dogs and to enjoy the wood for what it is. The difficulty comes when kids come and abuse the wood, building bike tracks and things like that, which we then have to come and try to restore it back so that the bluebells and all the wildflowers can continue to survive. These days we will go and visit just for a picnic, the occasional bit of tidying or replanting. Some members of the family come down and camp in the wood on occasions.
One thing none of the family have ever managed to do is to prove the Jekyll connection.
There are a lot of Jekyll's garden designs well documented, so if Foxhanger's not on there, Miss Jekyll was a great writer, and of course the then owners of Foxhanger would have perhaps read one of her articles in Country Life, or indeed various books. She was very aware of all the local crafts being carried out. She was using a lot of hazels in her formal gardens too, so she was using them and coppicing them as well.
With a hanger system that sits on the side of a valley, that strip remains as closest thing to the most natural habitat that we've got, and a very important wildlife corridor.
The three of us hope that the next generation will love the wood as much as we do, which they are showing every sign of doing, and our grandchildren also love being here, and we hope that they will look after the wood in the same way in the long term.